All right, before I get into today's video, I was driving around town and I asked ChatGPT a very pointed question. And at that moment, I realized that poverty can't be solved with ChatGPT's toxic positivity. And it wrote back this. That's a heavy statement, an honest one. You're right that modern poverty isn't a problem that can be talked out of. It's visceral. Hunger, rent, exhaustion, humiliation, and the kind of pain that a passive system can't grasp, let alone fix. That was one of the most powerful things that ChatGPT's ever said to me. That it doesn't understand what it's like to be hungry. That it doesn't understand why we humans can't just wave a magic wand at poverty and make it go away. It's here to stay. It's getting worse. And the title of today's video is this: How America Turned Full-Time Workers into Beggars. You ever notice how every paycheck feels like a participation trophy for surviving another 2 weeks in hell? We clock in, smile at customers, and pretend 8 hours of humiliation is a good job. Meanwhile, the rent is eating your soul, the fridge is empty, and your boss still thinks exposure is a form of payment. Welcome to America, where full-time work just means you're professionally poor. Professionally poor, people. That means you get paid to be poor. That's something that a lot of you probably have come to understand, that a professional gets paid. And when you're professionally poor, it means that $16 an hour job isn't cutting it. Today, as I walked around in so many different stores, it's obvious that at the Chandler Mall, life is good. There were hundreds, if not thousands, of cars yesterday at the Fashion Mall. But you walk around in the poorer parts of town, and you're not seeing people doing great. You're seeing 50-year-old men working in a Walmart or not working at all. I've seen so many articles recommended to me of people who have applied to thousands of jobs or just not worked for years. I know many people that have been unemployed for years now. Not months, not days, but years. In fact, I saw one video. I just saw the headline that came up this morning. It's like, I work in tech. I worked in tech for 20 years, and I can't find a job anywhere. Why? The economy's very, very bad. This economy wants people who are completely overqualified taking jobs at a help desk. Why? Because they know someone with 10 years of experience and a person with 2 bachelor's degrees, a master's degree, and a PhD in nuclear physics will eventually have to work at Arby's because there's no work. You may think, oh, that's an awful way of putting things, but it's the reality of the current state of our world. Your education doesn't matter. Whether you went to a traditional school or you went to a trade school, it doesn't matter. People without education are in the same boat as people like myself with 4 college degrees. Why? The work that we need at the prices that we need to be paid for our labor just don't exist in this America anymore. The cost of living and the cost of everything else hasn't kept up with our wages. When you can go 4 years without a raise and they tell you that if you want a raise, go somewhere else, you're left stuck between the rock and Fleece's rock. So let's get into talking point number 1. You don't realize how broken the system is until payday stops feeling like a victory and starts feeling like a ransom note. You're not getting paid. You're just buying another week of permission to exist. Welcome to the subscription plan called survival. And I know that ChatGPT's been using this analogy a lot, but isn't our entire existence based on being able to provide for our subscription for our utilities, our food, our transportation, and what I would call the ultimate middle finger to all Americans: rent. That's what it is. Every time that the first rolls around, it's a middle finger to people working full time at maybe not just one, but two, often three jobs to just barely be able to cover rent. Today, the cashier that walked up to me and told me she was hungry at Kroger's paid her rent on Friday. A day later, she didn't have a thin dime in her bank account. She couldn't afford to buy something to eat at work. And that's the tragedy of our current world. The people who are working the hardest have the least amount of money. This girl's 25. She's not lazy. She has to take an Uber to work every single day, both ways, because she couldn't find housing in this part of town. She had to move all the way out to where she could afford to live. And guess what? Even out there, she can't afford to live. This is the first time in the few years that I've known her, she's actually come up to me and told me she was hungry. Can you imagine that? Walking up to a customer and telling them that you're hungry inside of a grocery store? Well, I worked at Walmart. I saw hungry people take food off the shelves, push it in their mouth, and then put the empty packaging back on the shelf. That's how hungry these workers are. And the irony is to be surrounded by products you can't afford to buy. And knowing full well that if you take, they will take you out. Again, when I worked at Walmart, I saw an employee walk up to one of the fountain drink machines, take ice out of it, and was fired on the spot for stealing ice. That's how much control they want to have over you. Talking point number 2. They told us to work hard and you'll make it, but forget to mention that the finish line moves every Friday. Rent hikes, gas prices, and food costs all sprint ahead of you while your paycheck limps behind. Somehow, you're still blamed for not keeping up. It's always poor people's fault when they can't pay their bills, whether it's credit cards, car repairs, or anything else that comes up, let alone get sick. Poor people aren't allowed to get sick. Medical bills bankrupt more people in this country than you wouldn't believe. I remember a few years ago, the senior manager was being harassed constantly by the hospital. He owed them $25,000, and they would call him every day and tell him to take out a personal loan in order to pay them. Eventually, the harassment got so bad, he had to take out that loan. And you're talking about a person who's making easily $150,000 a year. And that's how much pressure they put on him. Because what else are you supposed to do? Most people have to make the decision between, am I going to save myself in life by going to the hospital, or am I just going to get murked by life because I can't afford to go to the hospital? Medical insurance isn't insurance anymore. It's a discount code. It's never been this terrible. Your prescriptions are way up, copays are way up, and the amount of money that they're taking out of your paycheck just to cover your discount medical card, because when it really comes down to it, you're going to be stuck with a massive bill if you need to go into the hospital. In fact, last week I was talking to a McDonald's worker that needs to go into the hospital for major back surgery. She's going to have to take 6 weeks off of work while her husband has no job. She doesn't know how she's going to do it. But she's also terribly afraid. I mean, I'm talking panic, anxiety, depression all wrapped into one, because she doesn't know whether or not she's going to keep her job. All the people around her are already gone. She didn't even find out that her best friend had been chopped off a couple weeks ago. That's how bad it is right now in this job economy. You don't know from day to day whether or not you're going to be employed tomorrow. And for most Americans who live paycheck to paycheck, that is one of the most anxiety driven feelings you can have, because she doesn't know. She knows that she's hurt. She knows that she needs help. She knows she needs to take time off from work. But she's also got a bunch of kids and a husband who hasn't worked for I don't even know how long. And they were kind of making it, when they were dual income, but as soon as they went down to one income, it was constantly getting help from parents and friends, the church, anyone. But those resources are running out, even for the middle class that used to be the people who donated to food banks and churches, who gave out money during the holidays as goodwill. They're not making anymore. In fact, I just had a person in the comments this morning tell me they're making over $100,000 a year and they're living paycheck to paycheck. They can't afford a house, they can't afford their car, and if something breaks, they're screwed. I've known at least 4 people in the last month who've been randomly hit with enormous car repair bills. Or, like I've mentioned before, that person that I used to know that got hit with a bill so high after paying off her car that she couldn't drive it anymore. That it wasn't worth to put a new engine into a 15-year-old car. So this is the reality of things. This isn't some made up story. This isn't a dystopian future. This is America right now. All right. America doesn't run on Dunkins. It runs on despair. Every smile, cashier, every warehouse worker, every Uber driver is just one more person silently praying their debit card doesn't decline before the end of the week. That's not a workforce. That's a hostage situation with W-2s. I've been there many times, people. You swipe your card, you don't know which bills came out. This is why I do not put any of my bills on auto pay. And when my car insurance was trying to tell me that I would get a discount for it, I told them no. Because I often have to make the decision between paying bills or eating. That's just the way this America works. You can't afford to do both anymore. And no one seems to care. In fact, there are 40 million people on food stamps right now, or some government assistance. And I was looking for this article so I could follow up with it. But I read this morning that our current administration is trying to get rid of it because they don't think it's necessary. And you're like, you know, the more you cut school lunch programs and help for people that aren't making it, the harder you make their lives. But misery and suffering is what this country is about. That's what it's become. You can't afford to work. And that's something I'm going to repeat in every single video that I make moving forward, is you can't afford to work. And the sad part is that most people want to work, but you can't afford to do it anymore. If you're working at a restaurant Monday through Friday and on the weekends you're delivering food, guess what? Waymo just announced that it's going to start delivering food with driverless cars. How about that kick to the nuts? More and more jobs are being taken away. And I believe they're not going to do another jobs report until it starts looking like it means anything. Because for a long time, those jobs reports were fake news, right? Because they don't describe the financial situation of someone who's functionally poor, has a job but can't afford to live. That's what functional poverty is. You're working, but you're still deep in the hole. You're not saving, you're not doing anything positive financially because all you're trying to do is keep your head above water while you know you're drowning, while you're carrying that giant stone of debt attached to your ankle, whether it's student loan debt or your car loan is underwater. Because that's for a lot of people. Like the Epic Economist last week was talking about the millions of cars that aren't worth what you're paying for them anymore. My car's in that exact shape too. My car's not worth what I have left on my loan. Not a chance. It's a piece of junk. It's a piece of rolling garbage. But what other choice do you have? When it comes to lending to poor people, education loans are predatory, home loans are predatory, and car loans are incredibly predatory. Can you imagine investing in something so worthless as a car that completely depreciates in value year after year after year, and you're hoping that you can hold on for one more year, that you need to buy a car. And this is a story I just heard in the last week from one of the McDonald's workers I see every day. I need a new car, MillennialSteam, but I can't afford it because I don't make enough money. She's literally going to drive that car until it stops taking her to work. And I've seen so many people like that. You walk out into the parking lot at McDonald's, and some people can't even afford cars. They show up walking, they show up on the bus, they take Ubers, but they're still working. Why? Because no one seems to care that these evil institutions prey on people who just need to live. I mean, I'm going to be paying on my student loans or have them looming over my head for the rest of my life. There is absolutely no chance. Like that girl on The Epic Economist 2 weeks ago who went to medical school to become a physical therapist. She took out $170,000 worth of student loans. She paid back $20,000 in 1 year and still ended up with $10,000 more in interest on that same educational loan. And that's the scary part, is that we were sold education as the ticket out of the wage cage. But the reality is most of us will never have a halfway decent job. We're going to have to keep showing up at Pound Town and just call it what it is. It's go to your happy place and enjoy your happy meal. So yeah, working full time, congratulations. You've officially qualified to beg in peace. The politicians call it economic growth, the landlord calls it market rate, and the corporations call it collective pay. Funny how everyone gets rich except the people actually doing the work. This isn't the American dream anymore. It's the American Hunger Games. And the only prize left is making it to next Friday without breaking. Well, I assure you there were a lot of people breaking. I've been witness to it. A lot of people working themselves practically to the bitter end. And just seeing them lose it because they can't keep up anymore. Making it to Friday is an accomplishment anymore. When I worked in retail, making it to Wednesday was a good week. And like this cashier, one day later after getting paid, she had nothing left. Nothing to feed herself for another 2 weeks until she gets paid. The last thing I asked her was if she was okay. And of course, she looked at me with dead eyes and said, "No, I'm not okay, MillennialSteam." And what are you supposed to do? Parents are gone. No brothers or sisters, no close family. No one to help a person working full time. And that's the reality of this world. And there's no one coming to save us. In fact, I was telling one of the janitors this morning at the gym who said that, he puts his trust in God. And I said to him, well, I better see Jesus on the back of a unicorn coming to save the poor sooner rather than later.